Hey there, welcome back to week 3 of being more intentional with our competing, but also just our life and our training. And I want to talk, before we get into this week's lesson, I do want to talk about training for a minute because I think that, I've been talking a lot about competing, and that's great because, most of us care about outcomes. I know. But I really want you to think about how you can be training either by yourself or in a class situation with more intention. And I know that for me, like the super easy, simple example. So a couple weeks ago, I go to a rally trial. I realize that Kelsey's getting very distracted. We need to work more with distractions. I grab that because I wrote it down in my journal after the fact, blah, blah, blah. So then I set up something for her when we're just one-on-one, and I, set out da-da-da-da, and yes, she's very distracted, easily distracted. She always comes back to me, but looks away, comes back, looks away, looks away. So I go to class the other night, and instead of just mindlessly doing what the instructor has laid out, I say, hey, I'm having trouble with distractions. I'm going to lay some toys around when it's our turn. Instructor's like, great, fantastic, okay? I bring that up because it's simple. First of all, it's a short story. But I think we are all guilty of showing up to a group class and just putting our minds sort of like on the shelf and doing whatever it is that the instructor has laid out for it that evening. And while that might be amazing and fabulous, speaking as an instructor, I love it when my students show up and say like, hey, can we? I want to work on this or what have you. I love it because that means they're thinking about these things. They've noticed a hole in maybe their training that they need help with, but they're being more intentional. They have a plan. So this is a note, and a note to you instructors. Ask for, hey, on Monday morning, hey, anybody, I know a lot of you trialed this weekend. Anybody have anything specific they want to work on? Or, if you are in a class with an instructor, send them an email, depending on your relationship with them, or show up with toys, as I did or whatever, and just say, hey, I'm trying to work on this. Either got any advice or, hey, I'm going to do this week because blah, 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 blah. I have never had an instructor be like, that's ridiculous. We're not doing that. They're always interested in maybe not my solution particularly, but they're interested that I want to work on something and quite frankly, grateful. Okay. So just think about that. I want you to be training with intention too. And just like when you're training, and I see this a lot, well, I see it in agility too, but I do see it a lot in obedience, that when in doubt, people just do a run through, right? So if you're training for novice obedience, they'll just be like, start with healing, go healing, then next figure 8, and then stand, and then and they're just going through the motions instead of, today I want to work on fronts, or I want to work on just the figure 8. Right? The other day, I just worked on a figure 8 with a distraction. All it was is a bowl, and that was it. Okay. So be more intentional in what you want to do. In agility, again, sometimes in a class, we just want to run a course because it's more fun. But what if you just worked on backsides or, or whatever, right? So just soapbox is coming to an end, but be more intentional about your training. I often call it deliberate training, but I think it also fits within the scheme of this month where we are trying to show up and be more present about what we're doing and not just being on autopilot and running through the motions. Okay? All righty. All right. So let's talk about kind of the planning and execution that we want to be doing, again, with more intention, aka running, with more purpose. Okay. So when we talk about our plans, and we all have plans, okay, I want you to think about the difference. I'm going to propose this. You can change the vocabulary. The vocabulary isn't important, but I'm going to talk the difference between about planning your run versus planning your course. Okay. And so even for those doing, obedience and rally and draft and all those other sports, like, think about it as your run, okay? But there's a course to it. There's an order to it, all right? So a course plan basically is where you'll be and when, right? I can do this here, this there, da-da-da-da, that we'll be together, da-da-da-da, okay. A run plan is more of how you want to feel and how you'll respond if things go off track and what mindset you're going to bring to the ring. Okay? So it's not just the who, what, where, when. It's the how. It's the feeling. It's the how you're going to, again, respond versus react. It's the mindset. And truthfully, when I'm talking about visualizing, this is also what I'm talking about. I don't want you to just visualize, like memorize the course or the pattern. I want you to feel it. Know like what's going to happen when you're next to your dog. Understand what it feels like to have your dog running next to you. What's your mindset? Are you super uber present? Like what's it about? So this lesson is about, taking the intention kind of from theory into execution so that we don't just hope to have a good run, but that we're showing up with the plan to support a good run. Okay. So one of the things that is very popular in the corporate world is this concept of like starting with the end in mind. All right. And it is an ancient Stephen Covey thing. If you are old enough, you know. But it is this starting with this end in mind, meaning what would success feel like at the end of this run? Okay. And don't say Q. You can't say Q. Okay. You want to. But like maybe it's connection. Maybe it's confidence. Maybe it's calm. Maybe it's joy. Maybe it's peace, But what does success look like? What does the end look like? So if that's what you want at the end, then you need to work from the end to get that. Okay. So you would anchor into that, right? You would feel like, okay, well, if I want to feel confident by the end of this run, then that has to be like a core part of my plan. Like, how am I going to run or feel or execute so from a place of confidence instead of maybe reaction or distrust, right? We sort of talked about like how trust is a really good antidote to being insecure. Okay. So we want to anchor a word or a phrase or something into our run plan the same way you'd anchor a course plan, right? With the cues or the footwork or the hand gestures or the voice or whatever it is that you're using for your course plan. Does it make a difference? Are you seeing the difference now? So that's kind of, I want you to always be, when you're planning to walk into the ring, I want you to always have both sides of this covered. Not just know what you're going to do, but how you're going to do it and how you're going to feel doing it. And I think we're skipping, a most part, the second part. And that part, that visualization, is a really important piece and is something that we can be working on like ahead of the competition, right? If I'm going to play obedience and I'm going to play it at a venue I've been before, then I can be working on like how I want that to feel. And it helps with my in-between exercises, pieces, and all of that, right? So like, yeah. All right. So if let's say, let's do this, let's integrate this. And we're going to integrate this using an agility course, okay? Because a lot of you are doing agility. So when you're doing your course walk, okay, obviously people tell you this all the time, but you're not just walking the lines or, the lines your dogs are traveling or, where you're going to put your blind, your rears, your fronts, and your side channel, all that kind of stuff. But I want you to walk the moments. So we walk an agility course multiple times. So one of the times, make it about the moments. Where might you lose focus? Where will your nerves most likely to creep in? Where will your dog maybe disconnect? Okay. Where are you most likely to go on autopilot? Okay. How many people, right, by the way, say that like, oh, it was, I did the hard part fine, but then the easy part or like the 4 jumps home, then, I took my eye off, right? Like for instance, I always walk the course past the last jump, right? Pretend you're going to another jump past the last jump, right? So you don't do that like pull up too soon thing. Okay. So basically what I'm saying is don't just visualize the mechanics, but visualize your mindset, the feelings, the reconnection, right? So if you find, like if I ask you, where might you lose focus? And you're like, oh, absolutely here. Then great. Then now you know how to answer that question. Now you know the mindset or the reconnection that you're going to bring, or the refocusing that you're going to bring to that moment. If you know that, you're most likely to disconnect after the easy or after the hard part, when it gets kind of maybe the easy jump done kind of a thing, then that's when you're going to say to yourself, reconnect, stay with me, stay in the ring. Okay. So again, we're visualizing not just the mechanics, but we're visualizing the mindset to these moments. Okay. So maybe you have to, then when you are walking the course, you're building in those connection points. You're building in the mindset points, right? So maybe on a contact or after a tunnel or something, there's all these, a few little places that you're building in mindset reminders into your course. And it sounds like a lot, but really it's super helpful. It's so helpful because there are always moments on a course where you can kind of take a breath or reconnect or refocus or, make sure that, you are supporting your dog by staying present. They're running in the present. You need to be running in the present. Okay. And so that visualizing that and getting used to that being part of your course plan, is really important, or your run plan, I should say. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So along the same lines, I want you to understand how you are going to recover should something happen, right? Like in obedience, are you recovering in between exercises? Okay. Or in agility, where are your recovering points, right? Where will you remind yourself to reset? Where will you remind yourself to breathe? Maybe at halfway points or something. Or, if it's after an error or a mistake or something like that, you're like, stay here. Maybe you just say to yourself, stay here, stay here. To me, that phrase is powerful because so often when a mistake happens in the ring, our brains tend to stay with the mistake, even though our feet and our dogs keep moving forward, right? We are mentally, we're like, oh, damn. Oh, shoot. I can't believe it did that. Oh, what? Well, in those, how many seconds, I was just thinking, just a few seconds, how fast down the line can our dogs already be, right? They're already gone. And we're still back at, 3 or something, right? Mentally. Okay. So, kind of sometimes even saying to yourself, stay with it, stay here, stay in the present, whatever, is reminding you that I can rehash that mistake that just happened later, but I still have more of the course to finish. There's still more to get out of this run. I still need to be intentional and purposeful and present with my handling. There's more to do, or even if you want to be funny to yourself, just say, but wait, there's more, right? But wait, there's more. We're not done. We're not just stopping and leaving. We're going to continue on. And I've also had this conversation with a client who needed to practice this in training, because what happens in training, we make a mistake and we stop. And that's good. That's good, right? I'm actually making myself do that more in obedience. I'm making myself stop more when I lose her focus, for instance. Okay. But I'm having to do that with intention because my autopilot is to just get her focus back, but keep going. My new intention is to stop. All right. However, in agility, what we tend to do is we stop and redo it. Okay. Which is great. Again, obedience, different venues, a lot of times we make a mistake in training, we stop and redo it because we want to get it. We want our dogs to get it. Maybe we want we to get it. Maybe we're the ones who made the mistake. We stop and redo it. That's amazing. However, every once in a while, do the whole thing and keep going, because what happens is when we always stop and redo, we are training our brains to stay with the mistake. Does that make sense? So let's say, imagine you're doing agility. Even if you don't do agility, imagine you're doing agility. We'll make it simple. There's a 10 jump sequence. Okay. 10 obstacles. Okay. You make a mistake at 5. In practice, normally you would stop, reset your dog up, maybe at 3 or 4, do 3, 4, 5 again. Maybe you'd even stop and reward then, and then maybe you'd go back to 1 and do all 10. Every once in a while, I want you to keep doing all 10 so that your brain learns to work through keeping going and staying with your dog even when you've made a mistake. Because what I am starting to see in handlers is that they don't practice enough keeping going through mistakes. So then they walk into the ring, they make a mistake, and their whole their system, right? Their mental system, even their physical body is so used to made a mistake, stop, stay with the mistake, fix the mistake, that they can't keep running, that they're almost incapable of staying with their dog and staying on track and finishing the course together or the run together or whatever it is that you're doing. Does that make sense? So I think, and this is sort of new just from talking to my clients, I think that we need to practice every once in a while in training, making the mistake, but keeping going. And not every time, because I get it. You're training, you're trying to fix something. I got it. I understand. But every once in a while, you also have to train yourself and your mindset to keep going. And that too is training with intention. You are not ignoring the mistake. You're saying I'm going to learn to keep going even if there is a mistake. Okay? So make sure that you're incorporating that as well. Okay. So again, you know that a run is only as useful as what we learn from it. Okay? So we have to learn and reflect and do that. So after the run, make sure you are asking, did I handle it with the intention I set? Right? Did I stay present? If not, where did I drift? Did I stay connected? Did I do those little check-in moments in the middle of the courses, right? Where I was making sure I was still connected, that I was staying with it, right? What went well, even if the cue didn't happen, okay? Make sure that you, in this moment, are separating the emotion from the data, all right? And even calling it data, I think helps separate it out. And sometimes this may take a day or two, particularly if you're super bummed about a run, right? And you still have a lot of emotion about it. But you want to ideally write down your observations like a coach would, not like a critic would, or like your instructor would, not like your, frenemy would, okay? And sometimes not even like yourself, because sometimes you're your own frenemy, okay? So make sure that you're being very data driven about what happened and what you can learn from it, even though we're talking about data about intention. Okay. All right. So you know what your homework is, purposeful runs do not require perfection. They require presence. Okay. We say that again. Purposeful runs do not require perfection. They require presence. So set your run plan or even your training plans that include mindset intention, a response plan for if something goes wrong, and a run review to get that juicy feedback. Okay? All right, that's all I got. Use your planner, use your index cards, use everything you got, and I will see you next week.